Welcome to Class Time, your daily classroom for CSEC and CAPE students. You can watch this lesson in real time on Television Jamaica's YouTube channel or OneSpot Media. We also are live on gojamaica.com. If you have questions on today's subject, you can send them to Television Jamaica's Facebook page at Television Jamaica or Instagram at television_Jamaica or use the hashtag TVJClassTime. We want to see those questions. Today's lessons is CSEC Industrial Education, and I am Fitzroy Hibbert. Today we'll be looking at electrical transformers. So, we go right into our lesson. Transformers. Our objectives for today's lesson are, at the end of our lesson, students will be able to define a transformer, state the principles of operations of a transformer, state the relationship between the input and output voltage and current of a transformer, calculate the voltage, current, turns and efficiency of a transformer, calculate the voltage regulation of a transformer. You'll ask, what is a transformer? And chances are a student who is learning this for the first time would say a transformer is a movie that comes on TV. Yes, you're right, that's a transformer. But if we're looking at electrical technology, what is a transformer? And the definition for a transformer is an electrical device that transfers energy from one circuit to another by magnetic coupling without requiring relative motion. That means you might hear a little bit of movements here and there, but between its parts. It's a static electromagnetic device that is capable of transforming or changing the value of alternating current and voltage at a constant frequency. I happen to put this in different color. And the reason for this is, a lot of times students might just say, a transformer is a device that step up or step down voltage, change the value of voltage. But you have two kinds of current, what is called alternating current and what is called direct current. A transformer does not deal with direct current to change the value. So I actually ensure that students will realize that we're dealing with alternating current and voltage. So do not leave out the current part of it. Don't say a transformer is a device that changes the value of voltage, full stop. And remember, it says at a constant frequency. What does that mean? At a constant frequency, it means that whatever frequency the transformer is connected to, that's the same frequency you will be getting out. Moving on. How is it constructed? A transformer is constructed with two or more coupling windings, or we say coils. And in most cases, a magnetic core, or a magnetic core. The coil are namely the primary coil and the secondary coil. So we have two coils. One is called the primary and one is called the secondary coil. They are so constructed on what is called a magnetic core so that the magnetism that is created by one coil is transferred to the other coil effectively without any form of hindrance. Moving on. Graphic symbol and basic diagram. So we look at the graphic symbol for a transformer. This is what you draw if you're asked to draw a graphic symbol to represent a transformer. However, if you're drawing this symbol in a circuit diagram, bear in mind when you come to the board, this would be your symbol. For your transformer, you would label it to say primary, and you label it to say secondary. However, bear in mind that when you're drawing this symbol, it is drawn horizontally, and you label your primary to your left and your secondary to your right. But if you're drawing this in a circuit diagram, and let us say we do it vertically, your supply lines, and this is a transformer on this side. Right? This would be your primary, and this would be your secondary. So you see you have your primary on your left, and your secondary on your right. However, if you draw the same transformer on this side, let me get rid of this. This would be your primary, and this would be your secondary. So when you join your transformer into a circuit, bear in mind that your primary side would be the one that is connected to your supply, regardless of how you draw it, whether horizontally or vertically. Then you look at the construct. The primary side, yes, is on your left-hand side, and your secondary is on your right-hand side, and it says out, and it says in. So your primary is really your input, and your secondary is your output. Then it has lines of force. These lines of force cannot be seen with your naked eyes, but for join references, we use this to show that there is a magnetic, or there are a number of magnetic lines of force that are being created, and they are transferred from one coil to another. And this represents your magnetic core. Principles of operation. How does a transformer operate? Can it operate just by throwing it in the air and it falls to the ground? No. A transformer operates by a changing or an alternating voltage is applied to one coil, and I said winding as well, which is called the primary coil, which creates a time-varying magnetic flux. Time-varying means that it requires time, and it is changing, so it may go up or down, in one core, which induces a voltage into the second coil. And bear in mind, the second coil is the secondary coil. Transformers come in range of sizes from very small, like maybe a little bit of size of your fingernail, to huge transformers, very, very huge transformers. And may I just say, transformers, those things that you see on your light pole in your area, perfect example of transformers. From coupling hidden inside a stage microphone, think of how small a microphone is. Transformer may be in here. But all of these transformers operate on the same basic principle. That basic principle is called mutual inductance or inductive, right here. Have the same principles. The principles are called mutual inductance or, did I tell you before? All right, we get back to that. A transformer has no moving parts. That means you just put it down right here like anything on your table, and it doesn't have to move any at all, and it operates. And the energy is transferred from one coil to another by means of electromagnetic induction. So I said mutual inductance before, and that's one. So I was hoping that, my students would tell me that the other one is electromagnetic induction. The primary coil, and I said it before, is connected to the power supply. So let's go back here. This is my power supply, live, neutral. And let us just use live and neutral for now. The primary coil is connected to my power supply. So this transformer has the primary on its right and the secondary on its left. This transformer has its primary on its left, this one on its right. This is for the purpose of a diagram where the transformer is now being in operation. The primary coil is connected to the power supply, and it will give out a version of voltage that is either less than or greater than the voltage that it is connected to. And this is dependent on a number of things. One, the number of turns in the primary coil, the number of turns in the secondary coil, and the voltage that it is connected to. So we are looking at four main things: the primary coil, the secondary coil, the primary voltage, and the secondary voltage. But bear in mind, it says the primary is connected to the power supply. So that voltage in the primary is called your primary voltage. And the transformer will give out a voltage, which is called a secondary voltage, which is going to be either greater than or less than the voltage that it was connected to. A transformer that gives out a lower voltage than the input is called a step-down transformer. At the beginning, I said students will write the lesson to say a transformer is a device that step up or step down voltage, full stop. Yes, they are correct to some extent, but bear in mind I said it also does that with current, and it does it at a constant frequency. A transformer that gives out a lower voltage than the input voltage is called a step-down transformer. A transformer that gives out a voltage higher than the input voltage is called a step-up transformer. Transformers by classification. How do we classify transformers? Transformers just don't come and you say a transformer is this, a transformer is that. How do we classify transformers? Transformers are classified using numerous applications and may be classified in many ways. One, by power level, from fraction of voltage ampere to thousands, even mega volt ampere. By the power level, by the application, the power supply, impedance matching, circuit isolation. By the frequency range, for example, in audio, in radio, you have a transformer that can change the frequency to how you hear sound on XYZ. Then, by cooling type, what method do they use to cool a transformer? Air, oil, water. By voltage class, a voltage can be from 110 volts, 50 volts to megavolts. The ratio of number of turns, and this is what we're going to be using today mainly, because we're going to be talking about the relationship between number of turns in the primary, number of turns in the secondary, the voltage that is applied to the transformer, and what voltage the transformer will give out. Isolation transformer, intended to transform from one voltage to the same voltage, meaning whatever voltage goes into the transformer, practically the same voltage you're getting out. Relationship between the number of turns in the primary, the number of turns in the secondary, the voltage in the primary, the voltage in the secondary, the current that flows in the primary, and the current that flows in the secondary. Now, if we look closely, we can look at it. At this point, though, we're going to be taking a break, a very quick break, so just grab a bottle of water, and we'll be right back.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much for watching.
Welcome back. This is CSEC Industrial Education. We're discussing electrical transformers. So let's go again, students. Before the break, we were looking at the relationship between number of turns, current, and voltage in a transformer. It says if the voltage that is applied to the primary of a transformer is divided by the number of turns in that coil, or say windings, the result would be known as volts per turn. The volts per turn in the primary is the same as the volts per turn in the secondary. And thus we would have an equation looking like this. The ratio between the number of turns in the primary and the secondary turns is equal to the ratio between the primary voltage and the secondary voltage. So I put in bracket primary and secondary. So you could say it the other way around by saying the ratio between the number of secondary turns and the primary turns is equal to the ratio between the secondary voltage and the primary voltage. And as such, you would have these two equations. Vp over Vs is equal to Np over Ns. Or you could write Vs over Vp equals Ns over Np. And here we have what each means. Vp means volts in the primary. You want to say volts on the primary side. Vs is volts in the secondary. Np is the number of turns in the primary, and Ns, the number of turns in the secondary. Now, when you have two equations, two formulas, two fractions equal in each other, we can do what is called cross multiplication. So let me bring you through that. So we have Np over Ns, right, is equal to Vp over Vs. So we're using one of them. We could use any one. It will come back to the same result. So when a fraction equals another fraction, we do what is called cross multiplication, right? So now I'd have this part multiplied by this part multiplied by this part. What do we have right here? We have Np, so this would give me Np multiplied by Vs is now equal to, you could say Ns multiplied by Vp, or you could say Vp multiplied by Ns. It matters not which one of them you put first. So I could have Ns multiplied by Vp. All right? And that would be your equation coming from what we have as fractions. Now, when we have it looking like this, from this, we could now derive a formula for any one of the four. So let's look. The following would be the formula for each what? Vp, Ns, Np, or Vs. Any one of the four you want to find a formula for, you can come right here and do it. How do we do that? I always have a smart way of telling how to get it. If I want to find Np, I would remove what I don't want to find, which is Vs. So what I would do is, let's say, rub out Vs, and I would draw a line on the other side here. And what did I remove from here? I removed Vs. So I will put Vs right here. So if you look at the formulas, I would have Np is equal to Ns multiplied by Vp over Vs. So you'd have a formula for each of them. So any three that is given, you can find a fourth by using any one of these formulas. So let's go into an example. An example reads, a transformer having 200 turns in the primary and 800 turns on the secondary is connected to 400 volts. Connected to 400 volts. Remember, the side that is connected to a supply is called the primary. So right away, students, this is your primary voltage. And is supplying a load. What part of the transformer gives out? What part of the transformer supplies? Is the secondary. Calculate the primary and secondary volts per turn. And remember, back then I said the volts per turn for the primary is the same as the volts per turn for the secondary. So anything you get for the primary will be the same for your secondary. And also calculate your secondary voltage. So we set it out looking like that. 1. Vp over Np, which is called volts per turn. But this volts per turn is for your primary. And it is the same as the volts per turn for your secondary. What's the voltage in the primary? The voltage in the primary was 400 volts. What's the number of turns in the primary? 2000. And that becomes 0.2 volts. So for each turn in the transformer, we would get 0.2 volts. Transfer this to your secondary, it would be the same, 0.2 volts. Now it says find your secondary voltage, or the voltage that supplies the load. And here's your equation. So let's go over here. Remember to set out the formula that is for your primary. And we said Vp over Vs, which is primary voltage divided by your secondary voltage, is equal to your primary number of turns divided by your secondary number of turns. What do we want to find? Vs. Therefore, Vs is equal to Vp multiplied by Ns over Np. Then we are going to now plug in the values of each of these. What's the value of Vp? 400. What's the number of turns in the secondary? The number of turns in the secondary was 800. And if we go back, we could find what's the number of turns in the It says the number of turns in the primary is 2000 and the number of turns in the secondary is 800. So we put 2000 down here. Now by virtue of using your mathematics skills, we could cross off 1 0 here, 1 here, 1 0 there, 1 there, 1 0 here, 1 here. All right? Then we say 2 into 2 goes 1, 2 into 8 goes 4. And then we multiply across, and 4 times 40 is equal to 160 volts. And that would be your answer, student. And if you look, we have 160 volts. It also says you could use what is called your volt per turn. Using the volt per turn method, how many turns were there in the primary? 2000. How many turns in the secondary? 800. Don't get them mixed up. Remember, you're working on your secondary side, so you have to use your secondary number of turns. All right? When a transformer is given, when a transformer step down voltage, it steps up current. And vice versa, meaning if it step up voltage, it step down current. Therefore, the ratio expression for voltage is the inverse for current. And you will get this equation. Vp over Vs, which is voltage on the primary, divided by the voltage on the secondary, is equal to the current in the secondary divided by the current in your primary. Also, remember in the first place we have Vs over Vp over Vs is equal to Np over Ns. So I could also write Np over Ns equals Is over Ip. And then everybody equals each other, given ratio. So this is your voltage ratio, this is your turns ratio, and this is your current ratio. A transformer given in ratio term will tell if the transformer is a step up or a step down transformer. Remember, we're talking about voltage mainly. When a transformer is given in the ratio terms, it indicates the voltage and the turns ratio. The inverse of this is your current ratio, but we mainly focus or use the turns ratio and your voltage ratio. For example, a 4-to-1 transformer or a 2-to-1 transformer, and I could say a 3-to-2 transformer or a 5-to-2 transformer, is a step-down transformer because what? The primary comes first. Whilst a 1-to-3 or a 1-to-5 or a 1-to-4 would be a step transformer. This tells you that the number of voltage on your primary is 4 times bigger than the number of turns on your secondary. This tells you that the number of turns on your primary is 2 times the number of turns on your secondary. And this will tell you that the number of turns on your primary or the number of turns on your secondary is 5 times the number of turns on your primary. Example, a 4-to-1 transformer with 300 turns in the primary windings is connected to 200 volts. Look again, students. Connected to 200 volts. Connected to. What side of the transformer is connected to a supply? The primary. So this is your primary voltage. And supplies and delivers a current of 2 amp. Delivers mean it is giving out a current of 2 amp to a resistive load. Calculate the secondary voltage, calculate the number of turns in the secondary, and calculate the current flow in the primary windings. So we are asked to calculate 3 things. But you're given a ratio. You're given the number of turns in the primary, and you're given the primary voltage, and you're given the current flowing in the secondary coil. So here we go with working out. Vp over Vs, which is your turns ratio. Your turns ratio that was given, your voltage ratio. Your voltage ratio that was given was 4-to-1. 4-to-1, as you would write it, is written as 4-to-1. But this written in fractional form is 4/1. So this is the ratio set out, but this is your fractional set out, which is the same thing. So Vp over Vs is equal to 4/1. What this is saying to you again is that your primary voltage is 4 times bigger than your secondary voltage, right? So to find your secondary voltage, all you have to do is to divide your primary by 4. Why? Because it said it is 4 times bigger. So we move on. Therefore, Vs is Vp over 4, which is voltage on the primary divided by 4. 200 divided by 4 gives me 50 volts. So the transformer is connected to 200 volts. It is giving out 50 volts. Np over Ns. What is this again? Your turns ratio. Turns ratio 4/1. It means that your primary turns are 4 times the number of your secondary turns. And you go ahead and do the same principle. Np divided by 4. 300 turns on your primary divided by 4 gives me 75. It says find the current in your primary turns. Is over Ip. You see the inverse right here now? This is the inverse that we're talking about. The inverse for your voltage is your current. So this is saying that your secondary current is 4 times bigger, or 4 times greater, or 4 times the amount of current that is flowing in your primary. So what do? Divide 2 by 0.5. By 4 gives you 0.5. And you have an exercise right here. The exercise, determine the unknown. From this set out, you could write a statement. Or from a statement, you could actually put your data form. This could be written in words to say, a transformer with 1500 turns in the primary is connected to 240 volts with a secondary turns of 500. The current flowing through the primary coil is 1.5 amp. Determine your secondary volts and also your secondary current. So we move to doing the calculation, students. We're going to set out our equation again according to how it was given. I am hoping that somebody home is going to work this fast enough, faster than how I'm going to be doing it. So VP over VS is equal to NP over NS is equal to IS over IP. All right, so we're going to plug in our values. What's NP? NP is 1500, so I could write 1500 right here. What is VP? 240, so I could write 240 right here. What is NS? 500, so I could write 500 right here. What is VS? Unknown, so I'd leave VS. What is IP? 1.5, so I could put 1.5 right here. Now, which of the fraction is completed? This one is completed. So I would now go 0, 0, 0, 0. And we say 5 into 5 goes 1, 5 into 15 goes 3. So here I now have a ratio of, what's the ratio? 3 to 1. So what do I do with this now? I must get this fraction down to a fraction of 3 over 1. Good? So for me to find VS, I would simply say VS is equal to 240 divided by 3. 240 divided by 3 gives me, very good, I see that. 240 divided by 3 gives me 80 volts. All right? And then I move over here and I will do the same thing. This one should be 3 over 1 again. That means I should have a fraction that when I divide by 3, I get 1.5. Because IP over IS is equal to 3 over 1. See that? But I already have IS. So what do I do to find IP? I said IP is equal to 3 times IS. Isn't that right? And 3 times 1.5 gives me, don't say 45, but 4.5 amp. Very good. So we can look at what we have here. All right. So we're moving on. Energy losses and efficiency. Energy losses and efficiency. Because current is flowing, we're going to be losing some form of energy. Because current is flowing, we lose energy through what is called heat loss. All right. An ideal transformer, I mean it is real, theoretically it is real, but practically you might have some form of differences. An ideal transformer can be considered as 100% efficient, 100% efficient. But in practice, energy is dissipated due to both the resistance of the windings known as copper loss and the magnetic effect of primary attributable to the core known as iron loss. So the two main losses in transformer, they are called copper loss and iron loss. Transformers are in general highly efficient. Why? Because this is due to them not having moving parts. Remember earlier I said that transformer has no moving parts. The transformer losses arise from winding resistance, which is the current flowing through the coil, and the resistance of the coil, square, the eddy current loss, hysteresis loss, mechanical loss. We will read them. You will get them so you can read them. In addition to magnetic friction loss, the alternating magnetic field causes fluctuation, and the fluctuation will cause some form of vibration and so forth. Stray loss, not all magnetic field produced by the primary is intercepted by the secondary. That means you have something along the side might be taken away some. All right, what is efficiency? How do you define the word efficiency? The efficiency of a transformer is a ratio between the input and the output. The efficiency of a transformer is a ratio between the output and the input. It means that whatever you get out of the transformer compared to whatever was given into the transformer, that is called the efficiency. A transformer can be considered 100% efficient, meaning it is ideal, as I said before, ideal theoretically. but in practice, we have losses. Because it has no moving parts. But its efficiency is affected by two main losses. And I did say them before. What are they? They are called core loss and copper loss. And if students should write copper loss first and core loss after, no problem. The core loss is due to the hysteresis and the eddy current, while the copper loss is the loss due to the primary and secondary windings. Remember, the windings are made of wires, conductors. And because they are made of conductors, current flow through, resistance, heat loss, I square R loss, and that is power loss. But they have two sides, a primary and the secondary. So you don't isolate them. The primary loss is added to your secondary loss to give you your total I square R loss. The efficiency of a transformer can be determined by the given formula. So bear in mind, students, in electrical, we have a lot of formulas. You have to practice your formulas. You have to practice your math. You have to understand how to use your calculators. All right. Efficiency is equal to your power out divided by your power in, and then you multiply by 100, and it is expressed in percentage. So if you are calculating something and you calculate and you get a figure, don't just write 96.7. Efficiency is expressed in percentage, so you have to put your percentage. What's the meaning of these? PO. What is PO? Output power, or you say power out. What is PI? Input power, or you say power in. And this is efficiency. From the formula for apparent power, VI, which means V multiplied by I. Power in would be primary voltage, of course, not secondary, not just any voltage, but your primary voltage multiplied by your primary current, and your power out would be your secondary voltage multiplied by your secondary current. It says, if a transformer is considered ideal, then the input power is the same as your output power. So anything that you get in is the same thing that you get out. But bear in mind, again, students, we say that's ideal, theoretically. Practically, you will not have that. So therefore, what's for power in? VP multiplied by IP would equal to VS multiplied by IS. Considering the losses, what were the losses we talked about? We talked about your I square R loss, which is called your copper loss, or your core loss, which is called your iron loss. Considering these two losses, the output power is less than your input power, of course, because you put some stuff in and you lose some away along the way, you must get something less in practice, all right? So we look at the formula. Power in would equal to your power out minus your losses, all right? And what are your losses? Iron loss plus your copper loss. I use your chemical formula or symbol, Fe for iron and Cu for copper, and your efficiency. So I remove now power out up here. And what is your formula for power out? Here is it. Power in minus losses. So I put power in minus losses, all right? By coming here, when you have a fraction looking like this, you would have power in minus losses over power in. You could split this in two to say power in over power in minus losses over power in. All right, I'm going to be leaving it right there for today, and then we get back at another date. If you have any questions of what we have done today, send them in our various platforms, and we'll answer them for you. Until next time, I am Fitzroy Hibbert. Up next is CSEC, Principles of Accounts. Thank you very much for watching, and have yourself a wonderful day.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much for watching.
That's perfect. So which one is the birthday and which one is anniversary?
Anniversary the 28th, birthday the 29th.
Okay, and when is his birthday?
May 6th, so I have time for
Forget few thing together.
me sorry for him, but I just say go yeah. Not true, sir.
I didn't know that your husband was born today.
Yeah, you were you
It's here. Interactive classes for all ages on the School Time channel on onespotmedia.com. With a combination of live Zoom classes and recorded class time, Schools Not Out lessons, and numerous educational content, we've created a comprehensive 24-hour channel dedicated exclusively to educating our nation's youth. Early childhood through to primary, secondary and tertiary, it's one stop on one spot for education 24 hours. Brought to you by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information in association with Television Jamaica Limited.
Welcome back to Class Time, your daily classroom for CSEC and CAPE subjects. Today, we'll be discussing CSEC principles of accounts, and our topic will concentrate on the double entry system of accounting. I'm Latoya Chambers-Hogg. So today, students, we will be looking at the double entry system of accounting with an emphasis on revenues and expenses. Before we delve in our lesson, though, students, what is it that we hope to achieve? Let's set the objectives. At the end of the lesson, students, you should be able to define clearly the meaning of the word revenues. State correctly the meaning of the word expenses. Differentiate clearly between revenues and expenses. Explain the double entry rules that govern revenues and expenses. Last but not least, students, you should be able to post accurately related transactions to revenue and expenses accounts. Sounds practical? Well, let's go. However, for this class, you will need your ledger, your calculator, your pens, your pencil, your textbook, and don't forget that will to win. Are you ready? Let's go. Now, students, COVID-19 is on the lips of everyone. And hasn't it been wreaking havoc in the business world? Let me ask you something. How has COVID-19 affected most businesses? In a negative way? Is that what I'm hearing from you, Joan? I agree. But you know, it is also affecting some businesses in a positive way, like those who produce like toilet papers, sanitizers, and masks, don't it? All right, because those things are in demand. But for most businesses, students, COVID-19 is really hitting them hard. Now, what are some effects that COVID-19 is having on these businesses? Well, I'll start with the first one for you. Goods or services are not being sold. And you can imagine why. So, you know, they're becoming dead stock, and you might have to go to the dead stock warehouse to get them cheap. Of course, a lot of people say nothing not keeping except COVID. So you see they close them in most stores. They're just there. Then we have workers being laid off. So sorry for this young lady. She has to pack her bag or her box. Some businesses too have closed. And closed due to what? Coronavirus. Some businesses too have been thinking about what? New business ideas. Very good. In order to remain what? Open. You see, the same old just can't work again. So therefore, they have to try now to pivot to new ideas. But what is really causing COVID-19 to have these ripple effects on the business? Yes, I see your hand. No, pay attention. Yes, Michaela. Oh, the business is not making enough money so that it can keep open. I agree with you. But let's see if we can put this a little better. The business is not making enough money. Money that is made by the business, what we call it? Yes, Joan? Good. Income. All right. Let me put you to the test. Give me another word for income that begins with R. All right, Paul. Revenue. I agree. Good. Now, bear in mind that we're going to look now at the double entry principle relating to revenues and expenses. Let's start with revenues. What are revenues, students? Revenues refer to income earned by a business mainly by the sales of goods or services. Zoom up a little on that definition. Mainly by the what? Sales of goods and services. Sales of goods. Refer back to last week's lesson. Give me one word for sales of goods. Sale of goods. Sales, good. So evidently, from this definition, students, you can see that what? Sales is a revenue, good. Or sales are revenues. Now, there are some other sources of revenue. We have set the foundation, students. So make sure you're taking your notes. There are other sources of revenue, and these include 1, commission received, discounts received, a reduction in provision for bad debt, and rent received from sublet of premises. Now, to better understand the double entry rules that govern revenue, students, we will analyze how both of them affect capital. All right? Now, let's reason. What effect do you believe revenues will have on capital? The owner has invested money in his business, and he's also earning additional money. What type of effect you think revenue then is going to have on his capital? Will it have an increasing or a decreasing effect? Kimaya? It is going to have a what? Increasing effect, because the money is what? Coming in. Good. Boom. All right. Now, what happens when there's an increase in capital? What do we normally do to the account? We normally do what? Come on, students. We normally credit the capital account. Therefore, students, likewise, when it comes on to revenues, what do you think we're going to do when posting it to the ledger? Will we credit or will we debit when there's an increase? Now, we will credit the revenue account to show an increase and debit it to show a decrease. Hold it. Don't let it go. Now, students, whenever there's an increase in revenues, we credit the account. Whenever there's a decrease in revenues, we debit the account. Write it down. Those who can, take a screenshot of this. You need it. See there again? For revenue accounts, to record an increase, we do what? Credit. Very good. And to record a decrease, we do what? Debit. Beautiful. Monica, pay attention, please. Now, let's just see if we can put this together nicely by doing a class assignment. Our first transaction states 2016, May 2, rent received in cash. Let's pull on what was previously learned. What's the first thing we're going to do? Identify the two items that are affected by this. One transaction. What are the two items that are affected by this one transaction? Rent received in cash. Rent and cash. But let's be specific. What happened with the rent? We did what? Received. So therefore, the two accounts that we're going to need then, students, will be one, rent received, and two, the cash account. Good? Rule up now. Let's go. Draw up your T account. Put in your headings. Date, May 2. All right? And wait for me. So May 2, rent received in cash, $5,000. Now we have received the rent. And rent received is a what? Revenue. Good. And what did we say rent received is classified as again? Revenue. And whenever there's an increase in revenues, we should do what? Credit the account. All right. So we're going to credit rent received. We receive the rent in the form of cash. Cash is an asset. And what does the double entry rule say? Whenever there's an increase in asset, we're going to debit. All right? Fine. And look at May 6. Commission received by check, $350. Commission received again. That's a what? Revenue. Are we increasing or are we decreasing? We are increasing. Rules again apply. Whenever there's an increase in revenue, we're going to do what? Credit. So credit the commission received account. And what did we get it in the form of? Check. So therefore, we're going to need to open up a what? Bank account, because all checks will pass through the bank. And we are receiving the check. So will we increase or will we decrease? We are going to increase. Bank is an asset. Good. You're learning, man. And whenever there's an increase in asset, we will do what? Debit the account. Now let's demonstrate in the ledger. You would have ruled up because I asked you to do that and to wait on me. All right. So here's our rent received account, student. We're in the ledger. Good. It's a revenue. We have just received rent. Apparently, we had sublet a part of TVJ studio, right? And to somebody. And we are now collecting from them what? Rent. Isn't that money coming in for TVJ? Of course. So there's an increase. Rule. Whenever there's an increase in revenues, we will do what? Credit the account. So watch me now. Which side is the credit side of the T account? The left side or the right side? The right side. That not change. Debit to the left, credit to the right. All right. So here we are on the credit side. We put in the date, May 2, 2016. How much rent we collected? $5,000. So the $5,000 will go under the amount section. See there, students. Hold it. Now, what's the name of the other item that was affected along with rent received? Yes, Kimaya again. Cash. So where will we record cash? Yes, Val? In the details section. So let's go. See it there? All right. Now, if you notice, folio is empty. Now, the folio column should direct us to where we can find the cash account. And where will we find it? In the cash book. CB4 cash book. Now, students, it simply means that this represents one of the double entry. This is just a single entry. And we would need to complete this double entry in the cash account. All right? So let's see what happened here. In the cash account, because cash is an asset, we would debit, see there, students, we would debit the cash account with the same $5,000 and the details rent received. Good? So that would complete the double entry for posting this rent received as a revenue. Credit the revenue account because we're increasing in revenues. Debit the cash account because we're also increasing in the asset, cash. Good. It's not bad. Not true. Practice makes perfect. So you have to learn to practice up your accounts. Now, let's look at the second one. 2016, May 6. This time around, students, we have received commission by check. Have you ever seen those guys walking around selling items in some large boxes, probably for a company? Sometimes they have like cosmetic products, etc. And they tell you like, if you buy this today, then you'll get this at half price, etc. Now, usually the more they sell, they get a little extra. That the business called what? Commission, all right? Now, let's say that we have received commission by check of $5,000. Commission received, again, is a what, student? It's a revenue. Good. Therefore, in receiving this revenue, are we increasing in revenues or are we decreasing? We are increasing. Go back to the road code. Go back to the rules. What does the double entry rule state again? Whenever there's an increase in revenue, we should do what? Credit the account. So here we are in the ledger. We've opened up our commission received account. And we're on the credit side because we've increased in revenue. We're following principles, students. We're following principles. So we come under the date section 2016 on the credit side. What was the amount? $5,000. Put in the amount. Now, what's the name of the other item that was affected? Check. And check must be synonymous to bank. So in the details section, we're going to write what? Bank. Notice folio was empty. But anyhow, the bank account is funding the what? Cash book. So in the folio column, you have CB here, which represents cash book. This simply means that if we go to the cash book, we should see the bank account carrying the same information as it relates to the transaction that took place on May 6th. So the folio is like a compass directing you to where you can find the other half of the double entry. Is that clear, students? All right, good. So here it is in the commission received account, the revenue account. We've increased in revenue, so we credit the account. And let's see what it would be like now in terms of us actually trying to close off the account at the end of the month. Now, look on the board here. If you notice, we're closing off at the end of the month. And to close off, on the debit side, I have May 31, balance CD as my details. Students, think back to last week's class. Would I be correct? Would I be correct? I taught you a very important principle last week. Would I be correct in recording balance CD as details? No, we would not be. Remember now, commission received is an example of a revenue account. And when we're closing off revenue accounts, remember last week I told you that some account balances are transferred. Revenue accounts happen to be one of those, or a set of those accounts whose balances are transferred. So instead of saying balance CD, we will say what? Because the balance CD would be incorrect, you wouldn't get the mark for it in exam. So therefore, you will have to do the right thing. Instead of saying balance CD, you'll have to say transfer to profit and loss account. This is a common mistake for students. Try not make it, or else you're going to lose your mark. It even can pop up in multiple choice too. So know your principle. Practice makes perfect. So this would be the correct thing in closing off the commission received account. All right? And you'd get your ticky. All right. Now, the other half of the transaction would be entered in the bank account on the debit side. The amount would be $5,000. May 6, of course, would be the details. In the folio, you notice I have GL, which stands for what, Monica? General Ledger. Telling us what? Telling us what, Jenny? That the commission received account is found in the general ledger on page what? 5. And again, guess what happened? And me make up the page number. All right? Good. Now, before we go a little bit further, I have a trivia for you. Let me see how well you've been listening and learning. Which of the following best describes the double entry system of accounting, students? Is it A, a ledger account must have two sides? B, an account must be written twice in the ledger? C, each transaction must be written in two subsidiary books? D, each transaction must have a debit entry and a credit entry? Think about it. The answer is coming up. Now, in the beginning, we said that businesses are being affected by COVID, and because of that, they are closing down, persons are getting laid off, etc., etc. It simply means, therefore, student, as we had established it, that enough money, enough income, enough revenue is not coming in to sustain the business. Because the business has what? Expenses to cover. And if you don't put in, you can't take out, right? If you don't earn, then you can't spend, right? So you'll face shutdown conditions. But having looked at revenues and having digested the double entry principles for it, let's now look at expenses. First thing though, what are expenses? The cost of operating the business. And I'm hearing you loud and clear out there. They're also known as what? Operating expenses. Good. Now, the cost of operating the business. Operating expenses. Can you think of any expense that a business might incur? Light bill? All right then, if you say that, Paula, light bill is one, of course. Even TVJ studio. See here, they need the electricity to run all the different equipment, right? And provide lighting. So that's one type of expense. And there are others. Rent paid, commission paid, wages paid, telephone expenses, even if it's phone card you buy for the company's cell phone if you're not on a CUG. And even if you're on CUG, it is still telephone expenses, right? Now, these are examples of expenses. Now, again, remember I told you before that in order to understand the effect of revenue and expenses, we'll actually analyze how they really affect capital, right? So, let me ask you, what effect do you believe expenses will have on owner's capital? When an expense occurs for a business, when the owner has to pay light bill, etc., what do you think is going to happen to the capital? Will it increase? Will it decrease? You think? What's in your head? It is going to decrease. Very, very, very good, Derek. It is going to decrease. Now, go back to the double entry for me. Whenever there's a decrease in capital, what do we do to the account? We do what? Debit the account. Thank you very much, Derek. You're paying some attention, man. Good. Now, because expenses will have a decreasing effect on capital, we will also have to basically debit the account when we incur an expense. Now, students, hold this road code. You're going to need it. Ready? Whenever there's an increase in expenses, we will debit the account, quite opposite to revenues. Because with revenues, we do what? Credit. Good. So if you know one, you automatically know the other because it's the opposite. Whenever there's a decrease in expenses, we are going to do what? Credit the account. Beautiful. Hold it. Record it. Don't let it go. Increase in expenses, we debit. Decrease in expenses, we credit. Now, what difference do you notice about revenues and expenses? If you were listening carefully, think about the examples for each group that we discussed. What's the difference? What's the difference? All right, Sims? All right, I agree. The revenues we get, all right, and the expenses we do what? We pay out, all right, good. Now in accounting language now, revenues are what? Received, while expenses are paid. Revenues are received, while expenses are paid. So you'll hear me talk about commission received. That's the what? Revenue. If you hear me say commission paid, that's the what? Expense. Rent received, that's the what? Revenue. Rent paid, that is a what? Expense. Look out for these things, students. CSEC can set you up sharp on your principles of account skills. Now, I made up a little mnemonic to help you. Rascal Roger embarrassed Peter. Rascal Roger embarrassed Peter. Rascal Roger, revenues are received. Embarrassed Peter, expenses are paid. Can't forget that. Hold it. Don't let it go. All right. Now let's look at an example now to actually bring out the double entry for expenses. Whenever there's an increase in expenses, we do what again, students? Opposite to revenue, we are going to debit. Whenever there's a decrease in expenses, we are going to credit. All right. Now, May 20, 2016, we paid rent by cash, $7,000. Sorry, which two items are affected? Rent and cash. Good. Analysis. Analysis. We use the cash, which is asset, to pay the rent. Do we have more asset in the form of cash or do we have less? We have less. So we will do what? Credit the cash account. Expense was incurred. We've increased in expenses. So we are going to debit the rent account. Good. You can't forget these principles in us, students. Hold them tight to your bosom. Don't let them go. Now, let's demonstrate in the ledger. You would have had your ledger sheet drawn up, right? You must be proactive. Stay ahead of miss. Stay ahead of miss, all right? So here we are in the rent account. We had incurring expense, so we increased in expense. So we're going to go on the what? Debit side of the rent account. It was on May 20, 2016. You enter that in the what? Date section. How much did we pay for rent? $7,000. So under the amount column, we are going to enter our what? $7,000. Good, students? What's the name of the other item along with rent that was affected? Cash. Good. So in the details section, we are going to enter cash. Question to the class, where can we find the cash account? In the cash book. Good. So in the folio, I will enter what? Will I write out the words cash book? No. C for cash, B for bank. Sorry, B for book. You see the accounts lesson just so sweet. I'm even making errors. So let's go. So in the folio column, we're going to have CB, which represents cash book. All right? So we've debited the rent account to show an increase in expense rent. Now, what's the correct way to close off this account? It's a rent account. See, I'm tying up everything nicely for you and with you. Let's see. Is it this way? Where would have details balance CD, rent, and expense. Think back to last week's lesson, students. Transfer knowledge. Will I use balance CD to close off the account? No, it's a strikeout. We will not use balance CD. We will use transfer to profit and loss account by principle. Remember, you were taught last week that when we're closing off expense accounts, we use what? Transfer to profit and loss account. Likewise, what? Revenue accounts, specific revenue accounts. Because you'll find later on that sales, though a revenue, may have to or may have different details. All right? Good. So, this is what it would look like in the cash account. Good? And we would close off the cash account using balance CD, of course, because it's not neither a revenue account, neither is it one that tracks the movement of our stock. All right? Neither is it an expense account. All right, students? Good. So we'll use the balance CD. And remember, if CD is on the debit, BD is on the credit. If CD is on the credit, BD is on the debit. Can't forget that principle. So, this would be the correct one, and you'd get your mark in CSEC. But if you ever do something else, dog, eat your supper. You won't get that mark. Now, try these for me, students. Ready? Right. Come on, pay attention, right. Stay focused. You know that I love it when you're staying focused, all right? Now, Richard, close that book. Yes, thank you. Focus. Instruction. State the accounts to be debited and those to be credited. State the accounts to be debited and those to be credited. Paid rent by check, that's the first one. Commission received by check. Paid general expenses by cash. Rent received by cash. Paid rent by check. Yes, Kimaya, I recognize there's no money there. It's not full transactions, basically, students. This is just basically to find out how much of the knowledge, the double entry knowledge that you have grasped. All right? So I want to know if you can accurately debit and credit. All right? I know there's no money to each of them. So paid rent by check. Which two items are affected? Rent and bank. Very good. When you see check, you know it's linked to bank. You pay the rent. Revenue or expense? Expense. Expenses are paid. Now, what will we do to the rent account in this case? We are going to debit the rent account and we will credit bank. Very good. Second one, commission received by check. Come on. Think. Commission received by check. Waiting on your response. Yes? Celia, I see your hand there. Commission received by check. Which two items? Commission received and check. Beautiful. Which, don't sit yet. Which two items again? Commission received and check. What will we do to the commission received account? We're going to, no, not debit it. Remember now, it's commission received, not commission paid. It's a revenue. Good. You can't forget that, you know. So therefore, we're going to do what? Credit the commission received account and do what? Debit bank. Good. What about general expenses paid by cash? General expenses. It's a giveaway. It's an expense, so we're going to debit the account. Good. All right. And then when we debit the general expenses account, Eulalie, pay attention. What will we do to the cash account? We are going to credit it. Who said they're not learning? every child can learn and every child must learn. Let's look at the last one quickly. Rent received by cash. We're going to do what? Rent received. Revenue again. So we're going to go back to our double entry principle. Whenever there's an increase in revenues, we're going to credit. So you're going to credit what? Rent received, and then you're going to also debit what? Cash, because you're increasing in the asset, cash. Students, you just can't forget your double entry principle. They're like the road code for accounts. All right? You must bear that in mind at all time. Practice, 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 practice. All right. Now, remember that trivia that I asked earlier? Here's the answer. Which of the following best describes the double entry system of accounting? The answer. Each transaction must have a debit entry and a credit entry. Marlon, I know you'd get that right. You think you're easy? All right, good. So each transaction must have a debit entry and a credit entry. That's a common multiple choice question, you know. You see, once you master your principal students, I don't know what CSEC can come with to beat you. All right? So, today we have looked at the double entry principles of accounting with an emphasis on revenues and expenses. Let's just summarize nicely our key points. Make sure you're taking notes. You have been taking notes because you don't know when I'll be testing you. All right? Good. Anything can happen. This is COVID. All right. So let's go. Key points. Number one, whenever there's an increase in revenue, we do what? Credit the account. Good. Whenever there's a decrease in revenue, we debit the account. Beautiful. Key point number 3. Whenever there's an increase in expenses, students, we do what? Debit the account. Whenever there's a decrease in expenses, we will do what? Credit the account. Now, if you note or look at this carefully, you will again see that the double entry rules for revenues are opposite to those for expenses. So if you know one, you automatically know the other. All right, students? Okay. Now, key points continuing. Revenues are what? Received, while expenses are what? Paid. And what was that little mnemonic that I taught you? Rascal Roger embarrassed who? Peter. Rascal, revenue. Roger, received. Revenue, received. Embarrassed, Peter. Expenses, embarrassed. Peter, paid. Expenses are paid. That little rascal Roger embarrassed Peter. Don't forget it. Now, in closing off a revenue account, except for sales, we use what? Transfer to profit and loss account as details. And in closing off an expense account, we also use what? Transfer to profit and loss account as details. Students, you cannot forget these key points. What I want for you to do, I want you to go over each of the transactions that we have gone through today. I want you to sit, make up your own list, at least 5 revenue transactions and 5 expenses related transactions. Post them to the ledger. Give me feedback. And I'll let you know if you're on the right track. Students, that's all for today's lesson. If you have any questions, send them in to the Ministry of Education and Television Jamaica social media pages. I am Latoya Chambers-Hogg. Up next, CSEC English Language. Please do take care. Until next week.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much for watching.
Here, interactive classes for all ages on the School Time channel on onespotmedia.com. With a combination of live Zoom classes and recorded class time, schools not out lessons, and numerous educational content, we've created a comprehensive 24-hour channel dedicated exclusively to educating our nation's youth. Early childhood through to primary, secondary and tertiary, it's one stop on one spot for education 24 hours. Brought to you by the Ministry of Education.
Hello, we're back with more in CSEC English language. We'll be continuing our journey today looking at informative discourse, writing formal letters. I am Vanessa Francis. So, the first thing you might ask, in this day and age when we are using computers, we're using our tablets and so on, letter writing, miss, really? But I'll have you know, letters are legal documents. So letter writing, even though it might seem tedious, is necessary, all right? So what we're going to be doing today, you should be able to describe the sections of a formal letter. You should be able to compare various formats of the formal letter. And of course, you'll be able to analyze features of the formal letter. So the requirements for the exam, though, requires you to use appropriate language and communicate factual information clearly, concisely, and adequately. And you'll hear those words being repeated quite a lot for the various sections as well. You're also supposed to use appropriate grammatical forms, suitable punctuation, and paragraphing. Again, it's English, so you will be able to do that. You should be able to do that. And of course, you're going to be conveying meaning clearly and with facility. So whatever you write, there should be no question as to what you mean. There should be no ambiguity. It should simply be clear. So the elements of the formal letter format, here we have them. Some of you might already be familiar, but for those of you who aren't, we need to run through them. So of course you have the sender's address. You have the date in full. You have the name or designation of the addressee, basically the person's name and their job description, their post in the organization, whatever the case may be. The address of the addressee. Then you have your salutation and then the subject line. You, of course, need to have the body. It's a letter, so it has to have a body. And the body is comprised of your introduction, the content, and the conclusion. Then, of course, after you finish writing the letter, you need to have a complimentary close and follow that with your signature and your name. So you'd write out the name in full and then your designation, whether you're a customer, whether you are writing on behalf of a club, so you're the secretary or whatever the case may be. So now we're going to look at some examples of the various formats of the formal letter. So here we have our first one. So we need to know that there are various formats. You have the traditional format, which is the indented style. And the indented style has the sender's address to the right of the page. Below that, you have the date. Then to the left of the page, you will have the receiver's details. So the intended recipient actually, because who you intend to receive it is not always who actually gets it. So you'd write that person's name, designation, and so on, as we mentioned before. And then you have the salutation also below that. Then you get into the body of the letter. And then the complimentary close would be to the right of the page as well. So that's the traditional style. That one is not so popular anymore. However, it still helps to know that this is the style. Now, the next style is the one that is more common and quite frankly, the easiest one to write, which is the block format. So the block format, everything is left justified, meaning everything goes to the left. So you don't have to think if it goes over this side, over that side. Everything comes to the left margin, but the order is still the same. So you have the sender's address first, then the date, then of course the name and designation of the intended recipient, their address, then the salutation, the subject of course, the body, and the complimentary close is also to the left side. So that one, as I said, is the more popular one. It's the most popular one actually, because as you can see, it's very easy to write. You just keep going down the page. Now the next format is the modified block. Modified block because most of the elements are like the block, with the difference of the address and the complementary close, which are centered. Everything else though is still flush to the side, just like the block format. So that one, not so popular, and we can understand why. Why would you just put the address alone and that? It looks a little odd, I will tell you. For me, it's a little odd. And then we have the last form, which is the semi-block. Now the semi-block is almost like a hybrid of the block and the indented styles. So the semi-block, the addresses are to the left. The addresses are to the left, however, the paragraphs are indented. So that is how you get a little hybrid of the block format and the traditional format. So let's look at the features of the letter now. So of course, your formal letter should have certain features that it adheres to. One of them being, the key one being, that the letter should be concise. Now remember, a formal letter is normally addressed to a business place, someone in a business capacity. These people are very busy. Their job is not to sit and read letters. So you need it to be concise so that they can get the information that they need quickly. They can scan your letter, figure out what you want, address the situation, just like that. The next feature, of course, needs to be authoritative. So your letter needs to speak with a certain amount of eloquence. So it must be well written, it must be professionally presented, it must have credibility, and because of these things, it will be taken more seriously. Of course, it stands to reason that your letter must be factual. Now, if it's factual, that means you're going to include certain details that can be proofread, certain details that can be proven. So you're going to include your dates. You're going to include whatever requirements. You're going to include names where those are relevant. Now, for this, your reader will know that, all right, this happened on X day, so this is what we should check on to see that, yes, that really did happen. Of course, you need it to be constructive. Now, remember, you are writing to people who are possibly in very high-stress jobs. So you do not want to be the cause of added stress, even if you yourself are stressed out in writing the letter. So you want to include positive statements, positive suggestions of action. So these will encourage whoever is reading to actually move quickly and get your issue dealt with immediately or as soon as possible. Of course, it needs to be cordial because you need to be very polite. You might be begging things, because you have those kinds of letters. So you need to be polite. You need to be complimentary. And these letters, again, you ever heard the whole idea of you might catch more flies with honey than vinegar? This is where it comes in. So you want to be polite. We're not saying you're going to kiss anyone's derriere, but you need to be polite. So the letters we're going to focus on today are the letter of complaint and the letter of request. So, complaint letters. The purpose, of course, to air a grouse, to seek redress, to highlight an issue that is affecting you. So the complaint letter, as the name strongly suggests, is to complain. However, do not take on a complaining tone and aura in writing the letter. Because remember what I said earlier, these people might be very highly stressed and you don't want to add stress to stress, and then your issue just gets swept away. So these are the things you need to pay attention to when you are writing your complaint letter. So the first thing, yes, you have an issue that requires you to write a letter to complain, but keep in mind, many of the errors are unintentional. So it's not anybody out to get you personally. They never sit down and plot and scheme and say, yes, we are going to do this because we know that you don't like it. No, it's possibly unintentional. So because it's unintentional, then they're more likely to want to get the issue resolved quickly and to make sure that you, the customer, do not have any further reasons to complain. Next thing, you need to ensure that you do address the letter to a specific person. Now think about it. If you just address the letter, dear sir / madam, or to whom it may concern, I don't know about nobody else, but personally, if I get a letter like that, then I'm going to say it don't concern me. I don't even want to read any further because it said to whom it may concern. I do not wish it to concern me. And you did not even bother to find out my name to put on the letter to know that it's me you must write it to. So those little details are necessary. And especially in the exam, nobody should be writing no dear sir / madam or any to whom it may concern, because you are the one who will be filling in that information. But in a real life situation, it helps to find out the name of the person who you should address the letter to. And it feels nice when you actually see your own name on there. Now, of course, we said this earlier, begin your letter with a positive note. Again, highly stressed individuals. They are probably dealing with several issues all at once. So you want to start off positively. Now think about your own self. If somebody comes to you very angry, shouting expletives, telling you about your body parts, you're not going to feel very good about that. So in your letter, you don't want to do the similar thing to whoever you're writing to. So you want to start off with a positive lift to it, even though a complaint, you go complain. Of course, you need to be clear. So in stating what happened, in stating the issue, make sure you are very clear. You don't want to have a case where at the end of the letter, they're sitting and scratching their head and squinting and saying, what exactly is the problem? Because I'm not sure. She said something here, but something else. What happened? So you want to be clear. And you want to make sure that your complaint is structured nicely so that there is no room for misunderstanding. Of course, again, be courteous. Just because you're complaining, don't mean you must forget the little manners where your parents teach you. So communicate clearly, but be respectful about it. And you want to make them know that, yes, you're dissatisfied with the service, but you don't have to get ghetto with it. You don't have to go gully with it. You can simply say, I'm greatly dissatisfied by the treatment I received, or I am most disappointed in the poor quality of the goods I received. You said the same thing, you never have, okay, you get the point. Be brief. Remember again, you're writing to people who have other things to do throughout the course of the day, other issues to address. They have businesses to run, departments to run, that sort of thing. So you don't want to go too much into unnecessary details. So you want to keep it to about a page. And you want to make sure you have short paragraphs. The short paragraphs are easier to read. They're more aesthetically appealing. When you have very long paragraphs, I don't know about anybody else. I love to read, yes, but certain things I don't love read. So if I pick up a complaint letter and I see one paragraph start in the middle of the page and go all the way down to the end, right then my head start hurt me, So you want to have shorter paragraphs. Of course, you need to be honest and straightforward. Do not tell any lies. They will find out. So you want to include sufficient details to substantiate your claim. So whatever the issue is that you're having, whatever the problem is, you want to make sure you outline it clearly. You want to make sure that you don't embellish. Don't put any extra things on there that did not happen. because right then you invalidate your whole claim, because once you're caught in one lie, then they're led to believe then what else is he or she lying about. So whatever is not relevant to the matter at hand, leave it out. Of course, you're writing a letter of complaint, but you can also suggest what can be done to make the situation better. However, notice the word is underlined. Make feasible suggestions. So don't tell them to give you $1 million when the item only costs 10. Don't tell them they have to give you a brand new item when you bought it second hand. So you're going to make a feasible suggestion. You're going to ask for things that will remunerate you for your troubles, but at the same time is something that they can work with. So you're going to indicate what they can or should do to address your complaint. You're going to explain why your suggestion or request should be granted. And of course, specify how long you're willing to wait to have your complaint be resolved. And again, be reasonable. Give the people a little time to get themselves together. So don't write the letter today and tell them, say, you want action by tomorrow. You can give them a week, possibly 2, depending on the nature of the situation that you're complaining about. So give a reasonable time. Now, you're complaining, you're being courteous, but you still need to have a firm tone, but respectfully so. So avoid aggressive accusing language. Again, you don't want to set them on the defensive. You don't want to upset anyone. You don't want to offend anyone. The very people you want to get results from should be encouraged to give you these results in a positive way. A positive way. So avoid the aggressive and accusing language. Keep your complaint concise. You've heard that word many times today and you'll keep hearing it over and over. Keep it concise and keep it professional. So again, you want to make sure you get to your point, state your point. You want to make sure you don't have a 10-page complaint. Try to stick to 1. And of course, communicate clearly but respectfully that you're dissatisfied. So again, you want them to know how you feel about it, but choose the right words to convey that feeling. One thing we are, most of us, if not all of us, guilty of is making generalizations. So you need to consciously avoid this in your complaints letter. Don't say, is everybody in the company, or every single time this happened, or every. No. Stick to the matter at hand. So if it's a case where it's just one person who is the issue, point out that is one person. Don't say the whole company. No, it was just that one person that you ran into that day who was the wrong one. Again, use tact and be direct, but still remain respectful. See how many times that word come up? So if you need to make a complaint to or about people that you have to have contact with regularly. So these are not people who you just went to the store one day and you saw them. These are probably people you work with, possibly a business that you will have to do continued business with. So you want to be tactful in your complaint because you don't want to destroy the relationship entirely. You just want to point out the fact that you have a little problem and you would love for them to resolve this little problem for you in a timely manner. So do not cut off your nose to spite your face. These are people who you might have to interact with soon or on a frequent basis. You don't want to make things very uncomfortable between you and them. When you're passing each other, you can't even mumble a good morning. No, man. Try not to do that. So if it's a case where these are people who you have to interact with after you have written this letter, make sure that the letter was as such that that little awkwardness, you don't have it. Please do not make threats. Do not say you're going to burn down the people in place. Do not say you're going to stone anybody. Do not say you're going to lay waste anybody. Do not make any type of threat of violence. Because if you do that and anything happens to the business place or the people, then guess what now? They have a letter here that you sent stating that you are going to do this, that, and the other. And what do you think going to happen? Even if it wasn't you, you get the blame, you get arrested, you get thrown in jail. So if the company has repeatedly given you bad service or they refuse to correct the situation, voice your feelings, but in a firm and tactful way. You may threaten legal action, that is fine. So you can threaten to take them to court, no problem with that. But make sure that if you threaten to carry them to court, you're actually willing to carry them to court. Other things you can threaten with is to take your issue to the court of public opinion. So you can tell them that, I feel so distressed, I will need to share my situation with those on social media. Now that, if nothing else, will get them to perk up and pay attention because nobody wants that kind of bad publicity. So you can make certain types of threats, legal action threats, or to publicize the issue. But again, do not threaten anything violent. You will go to jail. So, of course, you need to include your contact information. The people need to know how to get in touch with you to discuss with you the best course of action. So make sure your name is there and your address would have been in the sender's details. You can include your phone number and your email address. If it wasn't an emailed letter, then you have to tell them your email address and let them know that you are willing and able to discuss matters and they can contact you via any of these means, all right? Now, in a case where it was an item that you bought and are having issues with, then in your letter you need to make mention of the fact that you have the documentation attached. So you would make a photocopy of your receipt. Don't send your original receipt, my dear. If you send your original receipt, I hate that. So make a photocopy of it and say, I have attached a photocopy of the receipt so they know that it was bought this day at that time and the actual name and description of the item. Sometimes the description is there. So you keep the originals for yourself, of course. If it's a case where something is damaged, then you can take pictures of the damage and include the pictures as well. Or if it's a case where possibly it's an item like a blender or a fridge or a car, and you need to record how it is malfunctioning, then you can do that. If it's an email, you can attach the video or something like that. So you are giving them proof of the fact that you have a serious issue on your hands. And of course, you're going to keep a copy of the letter too, so that nobody can say you never write the letter. You have a copy for yourself. You can get it notarized and everything. So now to our next letter. So we've looked at the complaint. Whew. Now for the request, and this one definitely requires you to be nice. So of course the purpose, to solicit information or donation payments, a venue to host an event, any number of things. You can ask for sponsorship, you can ask just for a general breakdown of the services provided by an organization. So the request, as the name suggests, you're asking them for something. So these are the things you need to pay attention to in writing that kind of letter. Of course, you need to be specific in what you're asking for and remain on point. So just as with a complaint letter, keep in mind whoever you're writing to is someone who has other responsibilities. They don't have all day to sit and read your 10-page letter. So you need to make sure that your letter is concise. Get to your point. So if you send a long and unclear message, of course the reader may lose interest. They're just reading, and all now they can't get to what you want. Now you want to also create a professional image and a positive one and make it clear at the beginning what you're requesting and why. So if it is that you're asking for sponsorship for an event, you lead with that. And then you can always give them the little details to sweet them up later. But you want very early on to make your claim. So again, see that word that I tell you? Concise. So make the request letter clear and concise. So if it's hard to read, they can't just scan through and pick out what you want. Then they might just put it down and say, I'll read it when I have some time, and that time never comes. So try to avoid long sentences as well. You want shorter sentences that just get to the point, quick. And start a new paragraph to present different topics or ideas. And you learned this in paragraph writing. One paragraph to focus on one idea. Now, even though you're begging or requesting, try not to over-beg, over-request. So try to limit the number of things you're requesting in a single letter. All right? You don't want to stress out anybody. So if it is that you want several requests, then think of writing more than one letter. So maybe request in the order of importance. So the first letter is the most pressing need, and then another month or so you can send a follow-up letter or something like that. But you don't want to send this long laundry list one time. I don't know about you, but me get afraid when me see a long list of things to do. So again, why you should limit the number of requests. So if you need to make more than one request, think of sending more than one letters. And if it's a case where your requests can be paired, you can do it like in the example here. Could you please provide me with your current price list? I would also be grateful. So you're requesting information here, so you want to put them together and just use also instead. But again, try to make sure you are not frightening the people with one long list. And of course, just as with the complaint letter, you want to save a copy for yourself. You want to make sure that you have it on hand for your own personal files. If it is that you're running, say, a charity organization, then of course you need to have these as documentation. Of course, you need to use official language and business vocabulary, because you're writing to a business place, so you want to sound very official. You want to ensure that you have a level of formality. Yes, you're going to still be cordial, but you also need to be formal. So the person reading this letter must not feel like you're passing your place and you're becoming too familiar with them. So we're going to look at some examples of different types of letters now. And in looking at the letters, we are going to see how well you can pick up the different errors that might be in them. So here's the first letter. Remember, you want to read it closely. Look at all the details that are on there. Look at what might be wrong with it. So look carefully. Check out the address. Look at the body. Read the body carefully. Look at the close. Found your problems yet? You should. All right. So let's see if you got those problems correct. All right, so that letter was by Sammy Shaw, and it was a complaint letter. So let's look now. So no recipient was specified in the address, nor was there a salutation. So if you notice, it said the dreaded, to whom it may concern. Right then and there, it don't concern anybody. And in the address portion, nobody was specified. So John Brown's name wasn't there, not even John Brown's occupation. Now the subject line, what a mighty subject line. So notice the whole subject line could actually be a sentence in the body itself. Your subject line should be brief, to the point. So all it had to say was complaint regarding a particular item, and you could name the item number. The item number is given there, or the date of the purchase. But that long everlasting subject line will not do. Now notice that there are relevant details that have been left out. So the time of the call. It just says you called, but didn't say what time. You didn't say who you spoke to. So you didn't bother to find out the name of the person you talked to. You just talk and vent your feelings, and that was it. And no examples given of what was termed rude. So you say the person was rude, but what did they do exactly to determine that they were rude? And again, you have generalization. So this person is saying the whole company, when in fact it was just the one person they spoke to. So the generalization paints an unfair picture because it just might happen that that person is new. It just might happen that that person is in training, undergoing some kind of training to improve their skills, and you have now used that one person to judge the entire organization unfairly. So remember to avoid doing generalizations. All right, so keep those in mind as we look at the next letter, which you should be able to also find out what was wrong. So this one is a request letter. So again, you're looking at all the details. So you're looking at from the address right down to the salutation to the close. So pay close attention. What do you see on the address that should or should not be there? What do you see happening in the salutation that should or should not be there? Read the body carefully. So he starts by saying that he states who he is, says who he represents, goes into what he is requesting, gives a few details, goes on a little more, and then we have the close. All right, so now let's think about the faults. So the first thing you should have noticed, the sender's name is in the address. Now remember, once you close the letter, you're going to include your own name. So your name should not also be in the address. That makes no sense. So unless it's an official letterhead where the name is included, that's totally different. But if you're writing a letter, full block style or any other style for that matter, your name don't need to be up in the address. The only name that should be in any address is the one for the recipient. So Paul's name should not be posing up at the top like 66. Then, if you notice, there is no break between the addresses. They just basically run one right into the other. So you do need to have a little break between the date at the end of Paul's address and the beginning of the receiver's address. So there needs to be a little break there. Then you look at the salutation. The salutation, dear Mrs. Long, that's fine. However, you do not punctuate a formal letter salutation with a comma. You punctuate it with a colon. Then something that is missing. So the previous letter had one that was too long, and this one has none. The subject line. So Paul needed to have put a subject line in his letter in order to bring to the receiver's attention what the nature of the letter is. So he or she reading the letter needed to know that this is the type of letter. So if that person by chance is not the one who it concerns, then they can pass it on to who is. And then if you look at the tone of the letter, Paul talking to the lady like say him and she is good friend long time. So it did lack that sense of formality, that sense of cordial formalness. It did just sound like I'm long lost friend him I talk to. So don't do it. Remember, you want to be polite, you want to be professional. You don't want to have the people them saying, "Bukuya, how where you come from?" You don't want that sort of thing. So remember to keep the tone professional but polite. Not like Paul who talking as if him and the lady in a things long time. And yeah, no, don't do it. All right. So keep that in mind as we look at the next letter. So again, please I begging you, keep the letters on the level. So let's turn to Ken Thomas's letter now and see what Ken Thomas did that wasn't supposed to be done, what Ken did that he should not have done. So have a look-see at that one now. So remember, we're looking at it from start to finish. So look at the addresses. Look at the salutation. Look at the body. What might be missing? What should he have mentioned that he possibly didn't mention? All right, so let's look at it now. So the first thing you should notice is that the recipient's details incomplete. It didn't say who it should go to. No name is given. No job post is given. So it makes the address incomplete as well. And because no name is given, then of course he has to have the salutation being dear sir or madam. And remember, we try to avoid that, because when you just make it so general, then that gives the person the impression that you never even bother to try to find out who you must write to. Also, you notice, not a subject line. So it's bad enough you don't say who must get the letter. You haven't specified who must get it. But whoever picks up this letter has to go read the letter now to find out if it is that they are the one responsible or they must pass it on to someone else. You know how much time you waste? All right. So the next thing missing, no copies of the receipts or the photographs. So he mentions that, yes, the shoes were soiled. I'll know them don't see for themselves that the shoes really soiled. So he hasn't given any photographs of it. He hasn't shown them in any way that the shoes is really dirty. Him just tell them and they must accept his word of mouth. Really now? All right. So keep that in mind. You want to specify. So remember now, when you're doing your letters, be they letters of complaint or letters of request, there are certain rules and guidelines you want to follow. You want to ensure that, first of all, you keep them concise, remain on point, stick to the details that are necessary. You want to ensure that you remain polite. Even if you're making a complaint, you can still be polite about it. You want to be polite, you want to be professional. You want to ensure that the person reading the letter will be moved to help you. Not because you cuss them out and call them and tell them about them No, they will be moved to help you because they realize that you need to be helped. So keep that in mind. All right? So that's all for today. We've been discussing informative discourse, writing formal letters in CSEC English language. I hope you have understood the points we discussed today. If not, you can catch a repeat of today's lesson on JNN today at 4 p.m. and in class time highlights of the week programs. They are also available on Saturday between 1 and 4 p.m. on video on demand on One Spot Media. We also have 2 channels to help with additional lessons devoted to students of all ages on One Spot Media, School Time and School Time Maths. So check them out. Remember to keep safe, wash your hands regularly, sanitize and wear your mask.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much for watching.